They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes, just sometimes, it's served in front of several wedding guests while wearing a designer gown and holding a bouquet of white roses. My name is Victoria, and this is the story of how I turned the worst day of my life into the most empowering moment I've ever experienced. Some women dream of their wedding day from childhood. The dress, the flowers, the perfect moment when they say, "I do" to the love of their life. I was one of those women. What I didn't dream about was discovering that the man I was about to marry had spent our rehearsal dinner in another woman's bed. But before I tell you about the wedding that shocked everyone who attended it, let me tell you about the woman I was before I learned that love and loyalty aren't always found in the same heart. I met Andrew Castellano at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital. I was there representing the organisation where I worked as a development coordinator, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd bought on sale and borrowed pearl earrings from my roommate. He was there as the guest of honour, successful real estate developer, the kind of man whose picture appeared in the society pages with impressive regularity. "You're not having the salmon," he said, appearing beside me at the buffet table. "Excuse me?" "The salmon. It's been sitting under those heat lamps for an hour. Trust me, go with the beef tenderloin." He was right, of course. The salmon was overcooked and rubbery. The beef was perfect. It was such a small thing, but somehow it felt significant. This handsome stranger saving me from a mediocre dinner at a gala where I already felt out of my league. Andrew was 35 and I was 28. He had established where I was still building, confident in spaces where I felt uncertain. He owned a development company that specialised in luxury condominiums, drove an expensive BMW, and had the kind of effortless charm that made servers remember his name and hostesses seat him at the best tables. But what drew me to him wasn't the money or the status. It was how he made me feel when we were together. Safe. Chosen. Like I was the most interesting person in any room we entered. Our first real date was at a small Italian restaurant in South Philly, the kind of place where the owner's mother made the pasta by hand and the wine came in glasses that didn't match. Andrew could have taken me anywhere, expensive restaurants where meals cost what I spent on groceries in a month. But he chose this place because I'd mentioned loving authentic Italian food. "I want to know who you really are," he said over plates of homemade ravioli. Not the charity gala version of Victoria, but the real one. I told him about my life growing up in a small town, about my parents who still lived in the house where I'd learned to ride a bike, about my dream of running my own non-profit organisation someday. He listened like every word mattered, asked questions that showed he was really hearing me. When he walked me to my door that night, he kissed me like he'd been thinking about it all evening. It was the kind of kiss that makes you forget your own name, the kind that makes you believe in fairy tales again. The proposal came 18 months later, on the anniversary of that first gala. Andrew had arranged for the entire event to be recreated at the same hotel, down to the same menu and the same charity beneficiaries. When the evening's programme called for the auction to begin, Andrew took the microphone instead. "Ladies and gentlemen, a year and a half ago, I met the woman who changed my life at this very event. Victoria Hartwell, would you come up here?" My legs barely carried me to the stage. 200 people watched as Andrew dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring that caught the ballroom lights like captured starlight. "Victoria, you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. Will you marry me?" The ring was a 3-carat diamond solitaire, flawless and classic, the kind of ring that makes other women stop and stare, that photographs beautifully, that announces to the world that someone loves you enough to spend a fortune on forever. Of course I said yes. Of course the crowd erupted in applause. Of course it felt like the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of my life. The next 14 months were a whirlwind of planning. Andrew insisted on the best of everything. The ballroom, flowers flown in from Ecuador, a photographer whose work had been featured in Vogue. My dress was a custom Vera Wang creation, ivory silk with hand-sewn pearls that took 6 months to complete. "Nothing's too good for my bride," Andrew would say whenever I worried about the cost. "This is our once-in-a-lifetime day." My maid of honour was Sarah, My best friend since college, who'd stood by me through bad breakups and career changes and every major decision of my adult life. She was thrilled about the engagement, but occasionally worried about the speed of everything. "It's just, you've only known him 2 years," she said one afternoon while we were tasting wedding cakes. "Are you sure you know him well enough to marry him?" "Sarah, when you know," I replied, watching Andrew charm the baker into giving us extra samples. "Look at him. Look at how happy he makes me. Some people search their whole lives for what we have." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "You're right. I'm just being overprotective. He clearly adores you." And he did seem to adore me. Andrew called me his perfect bride, introduced me as the future Mrs. Castellano, and made a point of including me in every aspect of his life. I met his business partners, attended company events, even helped him choose art for his new office. The only thing that sometimes nagged at me was how often he travelled. Real estate development required site visits and investor meetings, he explained. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, always apologetic, always bringing me back small gifts from wherever he'd been. "I hate being away from you," he'd say, pulling me close when he returned from trips to Miami or Atlanta or Charlotte. "After the wedding, we'll travel together. I'll show you all these cities properly." Friday, October 15th, the day before our wedding, dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that photographers dream of and brides pray for. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by bridesmaids who'd driven in from 3 different states to celebrate with me. The morning was chaos in the best possible way. Hair appointments, final dress fitting, last-minute seating chart adjustments, and the kind of excited, nervous energy that comes with knowing your entire life is about to change. Andrew and I had decided to spend the night before our wedding apart, a nod to tradition that felt romantic and old-fashioned. He was staying at the Marriott downtown with his groomsmen, while I was at my parents' house with my bridesmaids, counting down the hours until we'd see each other at the altar. "No peeking at each other until tomorrow," he'd said, kissing me goodbye after the rehearsal dinner. "I want that moment when you walk down the aisle to be perfect." The rehearsal dinner had been beautiful. Andrew had chosen a private dining room at one of the city's best restaurants, and he'd given a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "Tomorrow I marry my best friend, my soulmate, the woman who makes me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. Victoria, you've already made me the luckiest man alive just by saying yes. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am." He'd looked so handsome in his navy suit, so sincere as he spoke about our future together. When he raised his glass to toast the bride-to-be, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Saturday morning arrived with October sunshine streaming through my childhood bedroom windows. My bridesmaids were already awake, chattering excitedly as they prepared for what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. The hairstylist arrived at 8, followed by the makeup artist, followed by the photographer who would document every moment of my transformation from Victoria Hartwell into Mrs. Andrew Castellano. As I sat in the makeup chair, watching my face become a more polished version of itself, I felt that familiar flutter of pre-wedding nerves. "You're glowing," Sarah said, appearing behind me in the mirror. "Absolutely radiant." "I'm terrified," I admitted, laughing at my own honesty. "Is that normal?" "Completely normal. You're about to promise to love someone forever. That's terrifying and beautiful and exactly what you should be feeling." At 11 o'clock, as the photographer was capturing getting ready shots of me in my silk robe, my phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you walk down that aisle. Today's the day we've been planning for. Love you." I smiled and showed the message to Sarah. "He's as nervous as I am." "Good," she laughed. "Means he knows what a big deal this is." By noon, I was fully dressed, the Vera Wang gown fitting like it had been designed specifically for my body, which of course it had been. The hand-sewn pearls caught the light with every movement, and the cathedral-length train spread behind me like a river of silk. My mother cried when she saw me. My father, who rarely showed emotion, had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. The photographer captured it all, the tears, the laughter, the pure joy of a family celebrating love. At 1 o'clock, we piled into the limousine that would take us to the Ritz-Carlton. The bridesmaids were giddy with excitement, taking selfies and drinking the champagne Andrew had arranged for the ride. I felt oddly calm, as if all the nervous energy of the morning had settled into quiet anticipation. The hotel was bustling with our wedding preparations when we arrived. Florists were making final adjustments to the ceremony arrangements, the catering staff was setting up for the reception, and our wedding coordinator was moving through it all with the efficient grace of someone who orchestrated perfect days for a living. "Mrs. Castellano-to-be," she greeted me with a warm smile. "Everything's on schedule. The ceremony space looks absolutely stunning, and your groom arrived 30 minutes ago with his party." We were escorted to the bridal suite on the 15th floor, a luxury room that Andrew had booked for me to use as a preparation space. The bridesmaids immediately started arranging my dress and veil, while the photographer captured more pre-ceremony shots. At 2:30, I realised I'd forgotten the special handkerchief my grandmother had given me. It was in my purse, which I'd left in the limousine. "I'll get it," I told Sarah, but she was busy bustling around with bridesmaid duties. "I'll just run down and grab it myself," I said. "I need some air anyway." The hotel lobby was quieter now, most of the afternoon check-ins having been completed. I walked toward the main entrance where our limousine was waiting, my dress rustling with each step. The doorman recognized me immediately. "The beautiful bride," he said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted. "But good nervous." As I retrieved my purse from the limousine, I noticed the concierge desk and remembered that I'd wanted to arrange for champagne to be sent to Andrew's room as a surprise. A small gesture, but the kind of thoughtful touch that felt important on our wedding day. The young woman behind the concierge desk looked up as I approached, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw me in my wedding dress. "Oh," she said, her voice uncertain. You're getting married today?" "In about an hour," I replied, confused by her reaction. "I was hoping to arrange for champagne to be sent to my fiancé's room, Andrew Castellano, room 847. The colour drained from her face. She stared at me for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Ma'am," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think there might be some confusion. Mr. Castellano, he checked out this morning. Early, around 7 a.m. My heart skipped. That's impossible. He's upstairs getting ready for our wedding." She looked at her computer screen, then back at me with an expression I would later recognize as pity mixed with horror. "Ma'am, Mr. Castellano was in room 847 last night, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, a blonde woman. They ordered room service for 2, champagne, and they specifically requested not to be disturbed." The world tilted. The lobby suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too full of people who were going about their normal Saturday afternoon while my life imploded. "You're mistaken," I said, though my voice sounded strange and far away. "My fiancé wouldn't. We're getting married in an hour." The concierge looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm so sorry. I remember because they seemed intimate, very affectionate. When I brought up the champagne around midnight, they answered the door together, and she was wearing one of the hotel robes." I stood there in my $3,000 wedding dress, holding my grandmother's handkerchief, while a complete stranger delivered the news that shattered everything I thought I knew about the man I was about to marry. "The woman," I heard myself ask. "Can you describe her?" "Blonde, probably late 20s, very pretty. She had a distinctive laugh. I could hear it through the door. And she called him Andy. She kept calling him Andy. Andy. Nobody called Andrew Andy. He hated nicknames, always corrected people who tried to shorten his name, except apparently when he was with her." I rode the elevator back to the 15th floor in a state of shock so complete that I felt detached from my own body. My wedding dress suddenly felt like a costume, the cathedral train like a chain dragging behind me, the hand-sewn pearls like evidence of my own stupidity. The bridal suite was exactly as I'd left it. Bridesmaids primping in mirrors, photographer arranging equipment, Sarah directing the chaos with the efficient love of a best friend who wanted everything to be perfect. "There you are," she said when I entered. "Did you find your handkerchief? We need to get your veil positioned in about 10 minutes. I stared at her, this woman who'd known me for over a decade, who'd helped me through heartbreaks and celebrated my successes, and realized I was about to tell her something that would change everything. "Sarah," I said quietly, "I need to talk to you. Alone." Something in my voice made her stop mid-sentence. She looked at my face and immediately ushered the other bridesmaids out of the room. "Vic, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told her everything. The concierge's revelation, the blonde woman, the champagne at midnight, the intimate scene that had played out in room 847 while I was at home with my bridesmaids, dreaming about my wedding day. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, protective fury. "That bastard," she said, her voice shaking. "That absolute bastard. On the night before your wedding, in the same hotel where you're getting married." "What do I do?" I asked, and realized I was crying, though I couldn't remember when the tears had started. "We call off the wedding," Sarah said immediately. "We tell everyone there's been an emergency, we get you out of here, and we deal with this properly." I looked at myself in the suite's full-length mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, perfectly made up, dressed in ivory silk and pearls, ready to walk down the aisle to marry a man who'd spent last night with another woman. "What about the invited guests, Sarah? Our families, his business associates, friends who travelled from across the country. The flowers, the food, the photographer, the band." "Screw all of that," Sarah said fiercely. "You can't marry him after this." She was right, of course. I couldn't marry Andrew. Not now, not knowing what I knew. But as I stood there in that hotel suite, surrounded by the elaborate preparations for a fairy tale that had turned into a nightmare, another idea began to form. My phone buzzed with another text from Andrew. 30 minutes until I see my beautiful bride. I'm the luckiest man alive. I stared at the message, at the casual audacity of it, and felt something shift inside me. Not just heartbreak or anger, but something colder, more focused. "I'm not cancelling the wedding," I said quietly. "Vic, you can't be serious." "I'm going to walk down that aisle," I continued, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. "I'm going to let Andrew think he's getting away with this right up until the moment he doesn't." Sarah stared at me. "What are you talking about?" "He wants a wedding. He'll get a wedding. Just not the one he's expecting." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of final preparations. I allowed the bridesmaids to fuss over my veil, submitted to last-minute touch-ups from the makeup artist, and posed for final pre-ceremony photos. But inside I was calculating, planning, preparing for what would either be the most empowering moment of my life or complete social suicide. My father appeared at exactly 3 o'clock, looking distinguished in his tuxedo and fighting back tears at the sight of his daughter in her wedding dress. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, offering me his arm. "Andrew's a lucky man." "Yes," I said, accepting his arm and feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "He certainly is." The ceremony space was breathtaking. The florists had transformed the ballroom into a garden paradise, with white roses and greenery creating an aisle that led to an altar draped in silk and candlelight. 300 guests rose to their feet as the music began, their faces turned toward me with the expectant joy that weddings inspire. I walked slowly, deliberately, my train rustling behind me as I processed down the aisle on my father's arm. I saw Andrew's business partners, his college friends, my childhood neighbours, colleagues from work, all the people who'd been invited to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And there at the altar stood Andrew. He looked perfect, of course. tuxedo tailored to his exact measurements, hair styled precisely, the smile that had charmed me for 2 years and had apparently charmed at least one other woman the night before. When he saw me, his face lit up with what looked like genuine love and happiness. My father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in Andrew's, completing the traditional transfer from father to husband. Andrew squeezed my fingers, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." The efficient Reverend Matthews stepped forward with his practiced smile and opened the ceremony with the traditional words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Andrew Michael Castellano and Victoria Rose Hartwell in holy matrimony." I listened to the familiar liturgy, to the words about love and honour and faithfulness, while Andrew held my hands and gazed at me like I was the answer to every prayer he'd ever prayed. When Reverend Matthews reached the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, he paused for the traditional moment of silence. No one spoke, of course. No one ever does. But then, instead of continuing with the ceremony, I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "I have something to say." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people held their breath, confused by this deviation from the script. Andrew's face showed the first flicker of concern, though he was still smiling, still playing the part of the devoted groom. "Victoria," Reverend Matthews said uncertainly, "is everything all right?" I turned to face our guests, still holding Andrew's hand, still standing at the altar in my perfect dress with my perfect bouquet. When I spoke, my voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the ballroom. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," I began. "You've travelled from near and far to celebrate what you thought was going to be the wedding of Andrew Castellano and Victoria Hartwell." Andrew's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel his confusion, his growing alarm, but I didn't look at him. Not yet. 2 years ago, Andrew and I met at a charity gala, and I fell in love with a man I thought was honest, faithful, and worthy of the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. For 24 months, I planned a future with someone I believed shared my values, my commitment to fidelity, and my understanding of what marriage means. The guests were beginning to sense that something was very wrong. I could see my mother's face in the 3rd row, pale with worry. Sarah, standing with the bridesmaids, had tears streaming down her cheeks. "Andrew," I said, finally turning to face him. His face had gone completely white. "Last night, while I was at home with my bridesmaids preparing for what I thought would be the most important day of our lives, you were here at this hotel, in room 847, with another woman." The gasp that went up from the crowd was audible. Andrew's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You ordered champagne for 2. You requested not to be disturbed. And according to the hotel staff, you and this blonde woman, who calls you Andy, which is interesting since you've always told me you hate nicknames, were very affectionate and intimate." Andrew found his voice. "Victoria, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice growing stronger. "Explain how you spent the night before our wedding in another woman's arms. Explain how you texted me this morning calling yourself the luckiest man alive while you were presumably still warm from her touch." I turned back to the crowd, many of whom were now on their feet, some heading for the exits, others staring in shock at the spectacle unfolding before them. "I want you all to know that I found out about this less than an hour ago. I could have cancelled this wedding, I could have quietly sent everyone home and dealt with this privately, but Andrew wanted a wedding, and I decided he should get one. You see, Andrew spent our entire relationship making sure everyone knew what a catch he was, how successful, how charitable, how devoted to me he appeared to be. He loved being seen as the perfect fiancé, the man who spared no expense, who treated his bride-to-be like a princess." Andrew was backing away now, his face a mask of panic and humiliation. Some of his groomsmen were moving toward him, whether to support him or restrain him, I couldn't tell. But here's what I learned today. Andrew is very good at performing love. He's excellent at the grand gestures, the expensive dinners, the public displays of affection. What he's not good at is actually being faithful, honest, or worthy of the trust I placed in him. So, Andrew, I said, turning to face him one final time, you wanted a wedding that everyone would remember. Congratulations, you got one. I slipped the 3-carat engagement ring off my finger and held it up so the entire ballroom could see it. This ring represents 2 years of lies, 2 years of betrayal, 2 years of me being stupid enough to believe that expensive gifts could substitute for basic human decency. I placed the ring on the altar next to the unity candle we would never light. I will not be taking Andrew's name. I will not be honouring or obeying him. I will not be promising to love him in sickness and in health, because he has already proven that his version of love is conditional, dishonest, and worthless. To our guests, I said, raising my voice as the ballroom erupted in confused conversations and shocked exclamations. The reception dinner has been paid for, so please stay and enjoy the food and open bar. Consider it a celebration of my liberation rather than my wedding. I picked up my bouquet, white roses that had cost more than some people's monthly rent, and turned to face Andrew one last time. And Andrew, since you clearly prefer blondes who call you Andy, I suggest you contact your friend from room 847, though you might want to mention that she'll need to find someone else to pay for her champagne from now on. I walked back down the aisle I'd processed up as a bride, but this time I was walking toward my future as a single woman who'd chosen dignity over denial, truth over comfortable lies. The crowd parted as I passed, some faces showing shock, others admiration, many simple confusion at witnessing the most dramatic wedding ceremony of their lives. Sarah was waiting for me at the back of the ballroom, tears streaming down her face but wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen. That, she said as she fell into step beside me, was the most badass thing I have ever witnessed. The bridal suite felt different when I returned to it, no longer a preparation space for a new life, but a sanctuary where I could process what I'd just done. Sarah immediately started helping me out of the wedding dress, the elaborate gown suddenly feeling like armour I no longer needed. How do you feel? She asked as she carefully hung the Vera Wang creation in the closet. Terrified, I admitted, sitting on the bed in my slip and stockings. And completely free. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Calls from family members, text messages from friends, notifications from social media where videos of my altar revelation were apparently already being shared. I turned it off. My parents appeared 20 minutes later, my mother still in tears, my father looking like he wanted to hunt Andrew down and challenge him to a duel. Sweetheart, my mother said, pulling me into a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you. What you did took incredible courage. I'm sorry, I said into her shoulder. I know this isn't how you pictured your daughter's wedding day. No, my father said firmly. This is exactly how I pictured my daughter handling betrayal, with strength, dignity, and class. Andrew Castellano doesn't deserve you, and everyone in that ballroom knows it now. The reception did continue, we learned later. About half the guests left immediately, but the other half stayed for what became the most talked about non-wedding celebration in the city's social history. My bridesmaids gave impromptu toasts about friendship and self-respect. My college roommate led a champagne toast to Victoria's courage and Andrew's stupidity. Andrew, according to several witnesses, fled the hotel within minutes of my revelation. His groomsmen followed, leaving behind a ballroom full of people who'd just witnessed the most dramatic public breakup of their lives. The story went viral, of course. In our social media age, dramatic moments like mine don't stay private. Videos appeared on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Local news stations picked it up. I became briefly famous as the bride who exposed her cheating groom at the altar. The attention was overwhelming, but the support was incredible. Women from around the world reached out to share their own stories of betrayal and liberation. I received flowers from strangers, job offers from companies who admired my courage, and even a book deal proposal from a publisher who wanted me to write about the experience. 6 months later, I moved to New York and took a position with a women's empowerment on a non-profit-making organisation. The viral fame had opened doors I never expected, and I decided to use the platform to help other women find their own courage in difficult situations. Andrew tried to contact me several times in the weeks following the non-wedding. Apologies, explanations, promises that it had meant nothing, that he'd made a terrible mistake. I never responded. Some mistakes are too big for forgiveness, and some people reveal who they really are in moments when they think no one is watching. The blonde woman, I learned through mutual friends, was a marketing consultant he'd been seeing for months during his business trips. She was apparently as shocked as I was to discover she wasn't his only romantic interest. They didn't end up together either. Today, I work with women who are rebuilding their lives after betrayal, divorce, and abuse. I tell them what I learned that day at the altar, that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is refuse to pretend everything is fine when it's not. I never did remarry, though I've dated wonderful men who understand that trust, once broken, takes time and consistency to rebuild. I'm in no rush. I learned that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who doesn't deserve you. People often ask me if I regret the way I handled that day, if I wish I'd dealt with Andrew's betrayal privately instead of in front of 300 wedding guests. The answer is always no. That moment at the altar, when I chose truth over comfortable silence, dignity over denial, became the defining moment of my life. Not my wedding day, but my liberation day. The day I learned that I was strong enough to walk away from everything I thought I wanted in order to keep everything I actually needed. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen. Sometimes the most beautiful thing a bride can do is choose herself.